Okay, I'm gonna get started because I said 6:35 and I'm sure folks are gonna keep coming in, but I wanna honor the time that we're giving to each other. So just to start, I feel like I hope in this world that we've been in virtual distance land, this is already the default, but like do what you need to do or do what you want to do for your body. If you don't want to be on camera, that's fine. If you want to be here for only 5 minutes, that's fine. If you want to eat really wetly and in front of the camera, that's fine and encouraged. But just do the style that you want. I'm happy to be here with you for whatever time you've got or whatever capacity you have and however your body gets to come to it. I'm tired and I get to be broadcasting from my room. So it's sweet, all of you all are in my room with me and I get to show you footage of the show. And so the way just to introduce a few folks that are in the room, Emily Sarah is here and is a co-host and is also helping to moderate. And I asked is another really amazing radical disabled professor, queer and disabled professor I've gotten to work with for the last 2 years. And I like that Crib TV broadcast. And she's gonna be keeping up with the chat a little bit because I'm probably not gonna be great at that while I'm screen sharing. We have Elle, who is so kindly interpreting. Thank you, Elle. We also have live captioning, which hopefully is showing at the bottom of your screen. If it's not, give me a heads up and we can figure it out. There is, I think that's most of the access stuff that's happening right now. The way I'm gonna move through the night is I'm gonna show you all some image documentation of my work. There's a move through video that I took on my walker. It's choppy, but I wanted to give you a sense of what actually circumventing the space might feel like. And then I've got two lovely beloved queer Crips in the room that are going to read from my thesis. I was writing a lot of stories during this time, so I'm gonna pass it to the incredible Clay AD and the other incredible Kate Fitz, and they're gonna read some of my writings. In that time, I'm gonna practice spotlighting people on Zoom. I've been teaching over Zoom, but that's new for me. So we'll stumble through together. And then from there, I'm opening it up to questions. I've planted two brilliant, brilliant humans named Lucasa and Diana. And so they are going to first ask me, Diana Lozano and Lucasa, I'm gonna botch your last name because it's long, but I think it's Brofman Mosimo, or you're gonna correct me. But thank you, because it's an amazing last name. So these two have some questions about my work because I planted them, and then I'm opening it to you all for questions. And then we have an incredible queer and crip DJ coming in from Philly through Zoom teleportation, who's gonna play a set for us. And you're welcome to stay for as long as that, same guidelines as everything else. Stay for what you want or stay for what you have capacity for. Great, so I'm gonna start by showing you all screen sharing and showing you some documentation and kind of walking you through it. Here we go. So this show happened at the gallery that, here we go, the gallery space that VCU supply allows or kind of supplies. Let me make this huge for you. Cool. So this space is incredibly frustratingly inaccessible. I'm a human. Also, just to introduce myself before we get, because a lot of you know me well, I think I jumped into things casually. I'm a disabled person, queer person, trans person, white person, person who is, I think who just got their master's degree in sculpture this, I think yesterday. From Virginia Commonwealth University. Right now I'm in Richmond. And the show space that we're kind of offered to use is in this building called the Anderson. And so right now you're looking at the outside of the Anderson. It's for my particular, the way I experience chronic illness, it's a super inaccessible building. It doesn't have any, before this show and before a lot of advocacy was worked on between me and Emily Sarah and also Chase at the Anderson, there's one step into the front door. There was no wheelchair with a ramp for the last, I don't know how long Anderson has been open. And then there's 5 flights of stairs inside of the building and there are no elevators. So one of the things that this work just met was my own mobility. I don't even want to say limitations, my own mobility needs, which are like, I depend on a cane a lot of days, especially while I'm in a flare up, which I have been in for a lot of the time I've been in school and I am again. And I also depend on a walker. And so both of those things make me require ways of moving through buildings, and it becomes really clear what buildings are like, and especially what art spaces intend for me to use them or intend for me to show in them or be an artist or be a viewer, and which ones don't. It's made explicit in all sorts of buildings, but I always find it to be quite heartbreaking in art spaces because those are the ones that I move through, or they feel like the most intimate to me, maybe in that way. So these two pieces are installed outside, and this is it's a super cobbly stone space. And then these 2 grab bars with most of the show you're gonna see, I went super rubber this show, which was such a delight. So most of the pieces are made out of silicone rubber, which is body safe and hole safe. So good for any any orifices of the body. And so here you're seeing 2 of the grabs. I just call these grab bars, and both of them have some silicone grabs on them, and you'll see some more grabs. Oh, but we got to get to the next page. Oh, there we go. And so right when you enter, one of the things you see is I've got a full screen video that I'm going to show you a clip of. It's a piece I did with a latex costume and a room full of latex balloons that ended up involving a lot of popping, but was mostly intended as a movement research piece. And what you're seeing 2 empty little guide holders there. What they do usually hold are a Braille interpretation of an artist statement and my artist statement. And one of the things I was excited about the show was that all text in it, by the Monday that it was open, because I was late on this, was also interpreted in Braille, which was good because it made it cohesive, because the show is so touchable to begin with. And so what you're seeing over here is one of the grabs, and there's many grabs. These are all also silicone and metal hardware. And all of these are installed from a reaching distance from the floor for me. So what we're looking at right here is what I keep calling the entire installation a performance score, a physical performance score. And this small monitor, this like CCTV, is a video of me installing them. So I installed all these what I call gropes. This installation is called or the installation of these grabs are called gropes. And I installed them using a small wheelie scooter. It's something that I use right now. My studio is populated by so many wheeled devices. It's like 2 body dollies, which sometimes are used by auto mechanics, but friends have lent me and also I've made so that I can be sitting and wheeling on the ground. And I make a lot of things from the floor because standing ends up being a little bit too difficult for my body. And so all of these holds are installed from a reaching distance from the floor. And one of my intentions with this show was I wanted it to really feel ground heavy. And I really wanted it to be clear that it would prioritize a body that was moving on wheels, was resting on the ground, or was like a really young body, like being just like not tall yet. So it's really oriented towards the floor. And one of the things I thought about was this idea of orienting, what is an installation orientation for a horizontal body, and especially as a body who experiences a ton of fatigue and a lot of horizontality. And so what you're seeing in this bigger room, and it's going to shift in again, is you're seeing there are also these floppy, also silicone canes that are on acrylic rests. And you're also seeing these cypress knees that are casted in urethane rubber. Less safe for all the holes of the body, but still bouncy. And they have kind of an amber color. And one of the things you'll hear, because I'm gonna read a little bit to you, is my relationship to the swamp and to swamplands and iterations and theorizations and cultural histories around swamps and illness and how we think through those things. And what it also has translated onto my body is often thinking about swamps and transness. And so they are populating the floor. These cypress knees, I feel like it's really wonderful. Everyone who has seen this work with me or talked to me about it has a different word for these like small apparatuses that come out of swampland waters. But they are part of the root system. And most scientists, or so far it seems like scientists haven't figured out exactly what they're doing, which, you know, and but the idea is that they provide more air to the trees because they come from bald cypresses that are sunken all the way into the water. Yeah, and I'll talk more about that, but I'll take you through more of the show. Cool, this is a close-up. One of the things I liked about that work a lot and got excited about in the making was it repositioned the floor as the surface of water. And that felt really exciting to me. And so now we're looking at some close-ups of these gropes. And these are also all silicone. They're really soft. They're low. They won't hold you. They'll let you fall. And that was important to me in the show. And we've got a close-up of this one of these canes. And what I'm going to show you, so I'm showing you all kind of the most legitimate or like kind of the strongest documentation that I got a lot of help with. And then I'm going to show you some videos of just what happens when people have been coming into the space, because I think that's the biggest thing that I haven't figured out translation for in this modality, because they really change when you touch them. And a lot of people, and some people in this room have gotten to touch them. Some people are even going to be featured in that part. But this is the last one. This is up a stairs, and this is the third rubber cane that I made. And then one of the secret pieces, this is from above, is I gave my walker really long ponytails that are made out of, they come off and they're like 6-foot long rubber floggers. They're made out of bike tires, and up at the handles are big faux leather scrunchies. And I just wanted a space. I thought there was a likelihood that at the show, or if I was showing the work, that I really would need a place to sit, and I really wanted it to be a throne. And I really wanted it to be a crypt throne. And so, yeah, this is how I made it. But what it ended up being is it lived in the bathroom. And so some people saw this piece and some people didn't. And one of the things that I was excited about it living in the bathroom was that it started to become a conversation with markers of access that we're already really accustomed to. And I liked the idea of it starting to make that divide between what sculptural interventions I had done and what already lives in the space a little bit blurry. Like these grab bars are in most accessible bathrooms, and actually, like, I already think that they're really sexy and beautiful. Like they're like finished metal in one part and then given like a grip through like a certain sanding. So that's what I've got for that. And what I want to show you next is I want to show you, in staying in the same kind of vein of capital D documentation, I'm going to show you all a clip from the video that's in there. So I'm going to screen share one more time. Thanks for being patient with me. Cool. And I'm just going to show you 2 minutes of this. This is the film, or this is the video that I'm going to give you the sound. So I'm not going to speak over it. I'm just going to show about 2 minutes of it. This is the video that was in, it was being projected in the first room that you come in. And it's called Breath Play. Cool. Okay, now I'm gonna give you, thanks. So that's a section of breath play. The excerpt in full, I just showed you like 3 minutes of it. The piece in the show, I showed 6-minute excerpt of a 3-hour performance that had a 5-day rest period afterwards. And the final thing I'm going to show you all, well, I'm going to just keep showing you guys stuff, so I'm lying. But I'm going to show you just a walkthrough of how it would feel. It's like 3 minutes. Let me share. Cool. Yeah, so from touching, videos, and this is really stumbling over this cobblestone and then really smooth in other places because I used my walker to take it. So you're getting a view from about my position when I'm sitting on a walker or rolling on a walker. And you're not hearing any sound because there's no sound on it. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start the readings by reading something from my thesis. And this also functioned as the artist statement, whether it should have or shouldn't have in the show. Cool. Gainesville, Florida. I grew up digging my fingers through millennia. I was a little too odd and feral for indoor Southern social mores, but I knew the creeks of North Florida. Stomping in the soft soil to scare the snakes out of my path, I descended into creeks strewn with gasping plastic bags, chewing tobacco tins, and the occasional syringe. They were a part of the sewage overflow systems in a town, and I felt at home at these margins of detritus. I parted curtains of Spanish moss and verdant green vines to wade thigh deep in the trash-filled waters. By the age 11, I could pick out shark teeth through the glimmer of the surface ripples without sifting. These fossils were a constant reminder that we had been underwater not so long ago. Megalodons had once roved the volume of air where I sheepishly stood and inhaled. Even without these artifacts, the land constantly ached with water. Floodplains of duckweed caught light and shadow to project itself as solid ground, only to ripple with the deep growl of a nearby gator. The land held a betweenness of material and state that I still belonged to. I spent this year's solstice on the same swampland prairie that I fervently roamed as a kid, and I was overcome with a sense of belonging to this landscape. As a queer, gender-different person in the swamps of North Florida, most of my childhood was spent discreetly trespassing and quietly wandering. I don't know anyone in Gainesville any longer. My parents and sibling moved out of its reaches towards South Carolina and the Midwest. Whether it was adolescent discomfort or an ancient kind of mourning in me, returning to Gainesville in a gender-altered body and trying to know the people who had populated my growing up felt like too vertical a climb for my horizontal spirit. Besides, I'm blessed with this type of belonging I've been given, that a landscape so fully taught me how to be in a body and a personhood that I wanted to grow into when the people who surrounded me couldn't. It lessoned me on transness and illness in a way that feels unjust to dredge into language. This is an ode to that hot, wet mouth of a landscape. I'm going to switch the share. And what I want to show you before we scoot on to clay, but it's a really good precursor for clay, is just some footage of the show being touched, because that's actually how I would love for you all to be experiencing it. But this seems like a good surrogate, so our hands get to be surrogate for the moment. It's a lot of wiggling. It's a lot of slapping sometimes. What I thought about in this part is right now, like there's interpretation, Braille interpretation on all the benches and on a few parts of the walls, that and written interpretation that just invites you to touch anything in the show and says that there's hand sanitizer around. But I feel like in a non-COVID state, it might be nice to keep the wet thing around, but it be lube rather than hand sanitizer or something else. So new opportunities. But I think it's important. And one of the things, a dear friend, Laura, actually was in the show, and I don't think could be here tonight, but was in the show a few days ago, and we were talking about the fact that I think this work really has a vernacular around sex for me, and that's like not the conversation that I've had with many people while in the show or in like reviews or inside of school setting. And one of the things we talked a lot about is that sex really starts to come through when the objects are activated, and especially like a dyke-centered kind of sex. So there's that. And some of these grabs are made from, are molded off of prefabricated rock climbing holds. And then ones like this, I started making my own molds of holes and things that I would want to be grabbing at, or that I would want to feel some kind of like support or connection with. And so the forms start to shift. Cool. And with that, we're gonna pass it to Clay, who I believe is in the bathtub and is gonna read one of the stories I wrote.
I am in the bathtub. Can you hear me okay?
Can folks hear?
Okay, cool.
Cool.
Oh, I love Alex. Alex, I love you.
I love you too.
I'm going to read a really beautiful part of Alex's thesis, and I hope I do it justice. It's called Images Swelled with Water. Hospital basements are full of water. It would seem to be a hygienic taboo for such a hermetically sealed place, but it's how the insides come to be conjured into image. To read the tea leaves of this body, I lie on a paper padded table, slime spread across my chest, then abdomen, then genitals, in preparation to dredge the images from my depths. There is no need for windows here. To be distracted by an outside sun would directionally deter us. The fluorescent lights dim to a desk and a plastic bulb, not far from the vibrating sex toy currently beneath my bed, is pressed and slid against my skin. I let my vision blur as the ultrasound slash EKG slash endoscopy slash oncologist slash cardiotech interjects the space with thin clicks of the keyboard, capturing my internal vectors for later analysis. These dark rooms are the most calming in the hospital for me. I interact with no doctors, solely techs and nurses to whom I don't pose a threat of unknowability. We are here to lie quietly and look together. A doctor will later privately contend with their ego while gazing at my distorted innards. Recently, I lowered myself from cold 5 a.m. air into another dark basement for an MRI scan. From the chuckles of the techs and nurses, I gathered that I was the most excited patient they had seen in recent time. I assumed MRIs were for the rich or the actively dying, and was elated to slide into this opportunity through neither of those doors. The MRI would reveal glittering caves of my innards, and I had yet to see. They were on the search for a third heart valve that was ostensibly lost to previous tests. In the liminal space of the hospital basement, my mind lightly grazed each material of the experience. The nurse's sheer blue hairnet, the marbled red and orange rubber caps suctioned to the vials of blood they drew, the magnetic, heavy breath of the X-ray room. Without intention, I mentally reviewed the material of my medical history. I had been busying myself and a younger sibling in the hospital waiting room since I was 5, when we started to care for my ailing parent. My father's first bone marrow transplant left my brother and I kettled into hallways and stark waiting rooms in order to protect him from our grubby child germs and us from the sight of him drawing too close to the veil. My mom moved exhaustedly between paid and unpaid social work for the same hospital he lay in. On the phone, I told my mom excitedly that I was preparing for an MRI, and she cackled. "You're beating our patient in residence. He has never even got one." I laughed and said, "You got me. I'm medically abundant." In my mid-20s, my sibling and I found ourselves trapezing back into hospitals for bone marrow testing, having been hesitantly asked by parents if we could be willing to give back our body matter to our father after the most recent set of treatments had failed. His next bone marrow transplant was incidentally but painfully scheduled for my birthday, July 24th. August 13th, I was scheduled for my own surgery after years of litigation and testifying my transness in courtrooms. The case is recorded as AV versus the state. My sibling and I both tested as bone marrow haploid matches for my father, but through streaming tears, I gasped that I was so sorry, but I needed to be well enough for my own surgery. My life is medicalized. Most people's lives are, to some degree. I often plug the bathtub while taking a shower and lie face down in the water. It's a soft drowning. In the water, I grope at the agency that I can decide when to be done with this ill body, this ill family, these systems relentlessly matting around these illnesses, or perhaps I am honoring my drive to cope using water, to vision through the current. It is undoubtedly both. In my early 20s, it was also part of pausing. I kept finding myself welled up in anger and desperation on my subway commutes those years. A transiting time suspended just enough that I would be matriculating the hospital stays, the appointments, the care work, the everything that needed to be done 5 states below me. Anger at being put on this medical pause. Whether leaving my life in New York to shuttle south and care for my father, clawing through insurance hold lines, sitting in New York Medicaid pews while waiting to testify in front of the insurance agency representatives who were telling me I was not applicable for care, or limping on 3 legs into my own medical appointments, I narrativized myself as being in waiting. This was not my life. I was waiting to feel better, to medically transition, for my family to get better soon. Following the gauzy blue hairnet, I was gently led into the MRI room. One large spaceship with a human-sized hole. The tech situated me with an IV that went in icy while I gazed up at a fluorescent tropic trompe l'oeil oculus. The text drifted out of the room and behind a glass partition. My body was slowly but loudly conveyed into the hole. Headphones inside my ears oscillated between the text voice checking up on me and a femme AI telling me when I was allowed to breathe. Medical breath play in a sensory deprivation hole. The hole shuddered with the sound around me. Surprisingly, mechanical clanking racked an orbit around my flesh. I was kept inside for 45 minutes, but I would have stayed for an entire day. The scans from the MRI are hallucinatory renderings of my chest, a heavily contested part of my gendered body. They are seductive and surprising as they shimmer into my own reaches of my flesh. My life is medicalized. It is made of horrific and beautiful medical experiences of illness, family, transness, care, advocacy, and hold lines. These are the waters that have trained how I love, how I care, how I know to cultivate and receive connection. They are not at all what I would choose, but they are what has trained me. Love you, Al.
Thank you so much, Clay. So now I'm going to pass it. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it to Kate Fitz, who is another beloved queer crip artist and maker in my life, who's going to read another short section. And let me find you and spotlight you. Okay, I think we got it.
Thank you, Clay, and thank you, Alex. I'm going to read Dimness, Nonlinear Time, ICU Delirium. I have been incessantly banding birthday candles into chain links. I'm not certain the drive, bending time, looping back on time. I'm experiencing the loop of yet another flare and grope to make meaning of it with my hands in the dim light of my bedridden room. With that same pull, I recently diagrammed my flares, litigation with insurances, and roles as a mainline caretaker. I absent-mindedly scribbled dusk body across the page. The line loops horizontally back and forth across a contrived vertical meridian of health. I looked at the page and thought of a horizon line and a sun that refuses to consistently set or rise, a refusal of diurnal time. I map spreadsheets each time I'm put in the position of a caretaker, whether it is of my own health or assisting a beloved. They map the treatment at hand, the next potential treatment when this one fails, the timeline for getting into an experimental treatment study, the contortions against insurance needed to get into that treatment, when the transplant is, who has the ability to cook and feed the household, what bathroom is cordoned off for the chemo spill, when I might be able to walk 3 full blocks again. The spreadsheets quickly disintegrate into the reality of time and illness. I redraft them, though frustrated, through frustrated tears, and weeks later, they are again inapplicable. One of my beloveds, Emanuela, has witnessed me repeating this process over the years. Through my frustrated tears, she astutely, softly coos to me. I don't think it's about the spreadsheets working, sweetie. This can just be how you take in this time and information. Keep making the charts, but it's okay if they keep failing. I scramble through these charts as my father is held for the 3rd time in the ICU. There are no windows and the lights are never turned off in this ward. Patients often experience something called ICU delirium, where they're unable to hold shifting time. The lights stay on to measure and surveil the failing bodies, to desperately contain them in the light of knowing. Contrast ink is IV'd in. Images are taken by shoving light through flesh. Light envelopes the body for maximum visibility. No shadows. I love when my body drags as diurnal, sinks with the rising and setting sun, wakes with enough energy to stand and shuffle into the day. These periods come and then slowly bend into a ravenous fatigue, breathless exhaustion that swallows days and weeks. Sitting upright becomes the drag performance of a health that I don't live in. So I'll revel in my dusk, transitional light less meant for sight. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kate. Cool. And so now I'm going to open it to questions. And I already outed myself and I've planted 2 questioners. But so I wonder if Diana or Luceza have anything that they want to talk about with the work, and also then it can open up to anyone. But y'all can just jump in.
I could jump in. Congrats, Alex. This is so beautiful.
Thank you.
First, loved it. Really happy to be here. There was something that I kept thinking about while looking at your work, and in terms of the silicone and the materials that you chose. I mean, besides the fact that silicone is like such a there's so much about touch and there's so much about malleability and flexibility of this material, but also I kept thinking about the way that this material deteriorates over time, and the way that there is this like finite life to this material. And it just really reminds me of like, it has so much to do with like our own mortality and our own sense of precarity of our own materiality. And yeah, I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of like the temporality of these materials, and yeah, if that resonates with you at all.
Totally. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I've just been so excited that rubber doesn't break as easily, and that like I could pack up this whole show and it could be kind of hypermobile and I could throw it in a box, that I haven't thought about how much it breaks down. But I think I have, and in making the work, was thinking a lot about failure. And the failure felt like a little bit more interesting than like Halberstam's queer failure. But like thinking about like that the softness doesn't hold us, and that when I set up these, when I install these silicone grabs, it's fun and it still stretches my body, and there's definitely a clarity, I think, in touching them and in my own installation, that they just like, they can't hold you. They can't hold any vertical. They're too soft and they're gonna let go of you. And so a lot of times, as I would kind of be like spidering across the space, setting them up, I would also think about care networks and kind of like the finite quality of them, or like kind of holding this like reality that they are incredible and abundant, and also they fail us sometimes. Or also sometimes there's like an incredible human in the room right now named Yumi, who I've talked about this with before in moments of like health crisis, where when like there is need that is greater than the community can even hold. And I think there's something nice about like a material that like is gonna deteriorate, like is gonna break down both as an object and is gonna have like a life of its own, in the same ways that like even when we have like the incredible kinship networks, or even when we've really built like these incredible care networks, like it's okay that they have cracks, or it's okay to be like, it's okay to be sick and disappointed. Yeah, so I think like I think it's like kind of, I mean, and also another human who's in the room, I think I talked with Taisha about heartbreak, and I think there's also something like about like touch and heartbreak, and like bodies and heartbreak, and these tiny little bodies that you can grab at around the room, that like also are going to have lives that deteriorate. That feels nice and cohesive, or doesn't feel like, it's kind of nice. I don't think I'm looking for like promises and solutions, and so it feels nice that they'll also fall apart. I don't know if that like a roundabout answers that question.
No, I really, really love to hear your thoughts on that, especially because of the expectations we have in terms of making work. Like, I don't know if you feel this way, but it's like you make something, then you kind of have to think about its longevity within like a capitalist context. And then it's like, whether you want to make work in that context or not, it's kind of like a question that's always asked. And I think it's great to approach it being like, these are beings that have their own expiration date, and like we can't deny that everything does.
Everything. And this is the best I've ever done at that. Honestly, most of my stuff before this have been way more breakable. Or way more like she was not going to last more than a week. So it's kind of nice. It's like these bodies that live a little bit longer. Thanks for asking, Diana. Lucas, do you want to talk?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you just so much for sharing and holding this space. This feels like, just looking at my screen is in gallery view, and it feels like all of the like pinks and greens and oranges like echo the grabs. And that feels really exciting that there's some mirroring here in this space that you've created. Yeah, I guess, well, maybe just rather than a question, but just something that caught my eye that I want you to like sit and share with us, is I'm thinking about like the communal hand within your work, and thinking about like all the hands that supported and mixed rubber, and then thinking about your acrylic nails at the opening that were shown in one of the videos, which was good. And imagining kind of like your beautiful pastel acrylic nails, and then all of our hands kind of like digging in the swamps together. And yeah, I was just wondering if you could talk more about like that specific landscape of the swamp, and this kind of communal swamp that you've invited us to put our hands in.
Totally. I love that. Yeah, I think, well, I love, yeah, shout out to Nails and shout out to Nails for Nails Relationships. Georgia also just put up their nails and they look great because we got them done together. But yeah, I think it's also really, I love you asking this question because you also were hands in my studio, like both of you. And I think when I started just giving myself a lot of permission about making work about a swamp, or about the swamps I grew up in, and just a relationship to the swamp, one of the things that felt like it cohered with the rest of like the sick and disability theory that I was trying to read or trying to find myself inside of much more was that so much more is found inside of swamplands for me with tactility than with visuals. It's like I don't go looking for things in the swamp. I feel like from my little brother, I learned who's here. From Evan, I learned to like stomp in the swamp and like send vibrations to the snakes. And from my feet, I know like which water is wet enough and murky enough that that like snakes will be really excited to be in, versus like which water is deep enough or has enough dry land right next to it that alligators want to be near. And I know it's like, and I feel like in a swamp, one of the kind of, it's just sight is not what is prioritized. And that felt really important to me in making work, that it's interesting. I made things that were really colorful, but like sight didn't feel like the most important thing. It really felt like you'd learn something by touch, or you'd figure out, or invite you into an imagination through touch. And I feel like I'm repeating the same thing, but I just don't go looking for things in swamp. I go like, and I find them with my hands and feet and with moving through. And that's where like, and I think one of the reasons they become like inhabitable places that then become safe because of how like inhabitable they're deemed, and how then they become maroonage sites, and then they become metaphors for the things that we deem villainous to our bodies. Like they are like a cultural metaphor for illness, and that's like really related to their connection to both state change and this fear of the miasma, or the air rising from the swamp. And also that like entire huge groups of people were experiencing tons of malaria, and the two competing theories were miasmatic theory, which is like that it was just like a terrible air was coming up and people were catching malaria from being in the air and from absorbing it, versus like germ theory, where they started figuring out that I think in the late 1800s, like 1890, I think, or 1870, they discovered the Anopheles mosquito, and they were like, oh no, there's a vector that's moving this germ. But there's something inside of like the closeness and sensorial closeness of touch, and these spaces that hold multiple material states at once, that really I think allow like intense exploration and intense excitement. And I think I shared this with you, Lucasa. It's like a few people told me that on the physical opening, there were some children in the space, and that they went and they sat down at all the cypress knees, and they started moving them along the floor and reorganizing them. And then parents kind of quickly, like as they were leaving, kind of did a chastise and was like, you need to put those back. And the children were just like, we don't, they're where they are now. And I think like, this is me jumping off into just what I want to blab about, but it's like to make an imaginary landscape and then to like invite people to have agency to actually like perform touch in it and perform exploration, but also like to have agency to change it. Like that, like honestly, that felt like one of the most successful moments I heard about like people experiencing the show. Yeah, so that's how I'm thinking of, and I think to just speak to the communal hand or whatever, it's like moments that I got to make things with people this year were like the biggest gift. Like you and HH and like, and Georgia and other people got to be in my studio pouring rubber. And that was, I so would rather be making things in collaboration with folks than being alone in a studio, which was constantly the crisis of being at this institution. But it was just such a gift. And so anytime it could happen, I wanted it to. And it's nice to kind of think about like it then inverting into like a collective touch in the space. And that feels like, oh, wow, if that like gets to be achieved, or it gets to be a space where there's like exploration in terms of touch and in terms of like making a space, that feels really exciting. Thank you for leading us on that brain trail.
Thank you for leading us on the brain trail.
Does anyone else have things that they'd like to ask? I don't think that we'll talk for a bunch more because we actually have a really beautiful DJ set that's going to happen, but I want to open up the space if folks would like to ask questions or comment or just hear a different voice than mine.
I have a question.
Go for it.
I'm an insider, but I'm not a plant this time. You don't have to answer this if it doesn't fit the celebratory mood, but I think I wanted to ask you what you feel is missing from your show, partially because I know that you had to work really hard on the parts of your show that were not your own art, in order to fight for the access devices and the ramp and many kind of like baseline ways for you to even have a show at the Anderson. And I personally know that labor was a big lift, and so I wonder, in this imagination, I'm wondering like, what do you feel like what was missing from your show that you may have added if you hadn't had to do that?
Yeah, I honestly think I just wouldn't be so sick and tired right now. I mean, one of the things that would be added is like, I wouldn't be this sick, which I think is cool to shed light on. And then, okay, this is a great question. I love this. Next time I have a next institution or next anything that I work with, like we have an access coordinator, incredible humans like Rusty, who is in the room right now. Anyone, how much would I have liked to have just made like this, I'm not going to talk bad about this particular institution support like the artists that they're showing, which like include disabled artists, but that would have been like, that was missing, like somebody who actually could coordinate that, so I wasn't doing that labor. But I think the things that are missing from this show are much more related to like COVID than related to that labor. That labor makes me like sick and angry, but like COVID makes it so that I couldn't plan a big facilitation, or I couldn't be in the room with all of you all, or like we couldn't have like made the whole, I mean, as the non-plant, but Georgia, who very much was a big advocate for more slime in the show and consistently was like, I don't know, it seems kind of dry in here. Like we couldn't have more slime because of COVID and some safety precautions, but mostly COVID I want to name. But I think those things, I think in future iterations, I would really love there to be like actually getting to plan facilitations or actually getting to plan to be in the space and experiment with the things together in like whatever kind of formalized quality there is. And then, yeah, I want there to be access coordinators. I want there to be like access consultants that are paid really well and are queer and are like and have like full-time work with these institutions, because they're really making it clear who gets to be a person who makes work and who gets to see work. And I think it's heinous. Thanks, George. Yeah. Does anybody else want to talk? We can turn it over in like 5 minutes.
I have a question.
Yes, lovely Devon.
First of all, hi.
Hi. I love
Congrats, so major. Love you.
you. Thank you.
So I like what someone said earlier about the work being collaborative, and I wish I was there in person, because I feel like obviously like the mechanism of touch necessitates like a totally different experience and a totally different telling of the work. But something that's interesting to me is I feel like the writing and the text pieces also act as their own kind of footholds and these places to grab onto for someone who's kind of being led through the cavern of your own experience. And so I kind of wanted to understand what that collaborativeness in terms of the text means to you as it relates to the sculpture.
Do you mean like other people reading text, or do you mean like the text text work collaborating with physical work, and both of them being kind of collaborators in my studio?
Yeah, I think both. I think I mostly mean the latter, but also interested in the former.
Yeah, well, the former is kind of, that one's just like more through line to talk about is, like I asked, Clay and Kate are two of some of my favorite humans in the world, but also there are other like chronically ill and queer humans that we share a lot of experience. And also there was really a sweetness about talking with them, like sharing all my texts and talking with them about what they'd feel excited or comfortable reading. And there was a really nice gravity brought to that of like, I want to read stuff that I like also have a relationship to and that my body has a relationship to. And so in terms of that collaboration, it does feel like this felt like a really great opportunity while we're still in a cultural mindset of like using a lot of distance Zoom to just like build on queer and crip community. So it felt like, okay, we're gonna put our foothold on there, or our handhold, or our lying hold. And then between the like works and the texts, I love that question. And if I'm gonna be honest, I don't have an answer. I think it's like, I really struggle and whined the whole way that I had to write this thesis. I was like, every single time, actually, like I'd be on the phone with Sabina, who's in the room, and I'd be like, I could be making a mold of a tentacle right now. And instead, what am I doing? I'm typing at a computer. And she would be incredible and tell me, no, you have to go and type at a computer because we need you to have this degree. Yes. And so I think, but like thinking about more access points and being like, some people aren't gonna want to touch, and some people are really gonna like feel more comfort or more excitement like sitting in language. And maybe thinking about it like as an invitation for that, and knowing that like I'm a slow reader and I'm a slow writer and I kind of trudge through, but it is like where I get a lot of energy. So just trying to like invite that as a collaborator, even if I don't really know where it lands right now. But I like thinking about that, and I want to think about that more, and I'd love to think about that more with you. Because you write, Devon is an incredible writer and maker and runs a project called Yardy. Y'all, this room is just like full to the brim with like incredible artists. Thanks, Devon.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Anybody else before we just dance?
Alex, I have a question. Oh,
yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
I wanted to know if you can speak a little bit more about your video piece, because I feel like the rest of the exhibit with the holds, with the gropes, there's so much about like this sense of like hope and desire in them. And then especially the part where like I saw you laying on the balloon and it pops and then you feel that, you know, impact on the floor, like it really resonates with me, and, you know, like who might not understand your specific disability, but like, you know, if you could speak about that piece just a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Also, you all, Yenji and Eric, who are in that box, are like people who have trained me to be such an incredible teacher, because they are such incredible teachers. Just like big applause to them. But so one of the things I think I was like, what ended up coming from that performance is I started that performance such a goofball. I was like, oh, I forgot about balloons popping, like just completely. And I started by being like, I'm gonna make myself a latex outfit, which you saw in the performance. And I wanna feel my body slither. I wanna fill this room to the brim with balloons, which I also like, I hit 600 balloons and still didn't fill it to the, like there were like, the performance took on its own quality. But it was interesting because I really had this idea of like, oh, I want to see with my cane and with my body, like how this could be like a research, like a movement research. And so I went in just kind of being like, okay, this is an intuitive thing that I want to do. We're just gonna go for it. And what was really interesting is in doing the performance, well, everything started popping, even in setting up the performance. I think there was fiberglass in the room. It was like really, like, it just was like, okay, it got really clear really quick that it was going to go differently. And it started becoming so much about these volumes of air, and so much of how I like kind of how I experience my body. And when my body is the hardest to be in, I feel really breathless. Like it's really hard for me to take in air. And so I'm using a cane much more just for fatigue and for like having stability when I'm having trouble breathing. And what was interesting, so in making that performance, or in making that footage, it really became like rests were embedded in it, and also pain was embedded in it. Like when it was an interesting, it also quickly fell into kind of like a kind of a quick play in sadomasochism, where I was like pretty quickly, took me about an hour of doing it, and then I got really used to the popping, and I could start anticipating it, and I could start anticipating the sensation and kind of getting fascinated with it. Versus at the beginning, I really didn't like it. It was a really small room and I had to put in earplugs. But it's interesting because what I like about that work in the show, and I think they kind of reverberate on really different, with really different like visual vernacular and maybe even emotional vernacular, but I liked how much breath ended up in the show, and that all the balloons ended up being like these vessels of breath that I couldn't actually take in, and then were popping under me and causing pain, but we're still physicalizing space and breath and volume. Even though I didn't fill them up with my breath, I like couldn't have done that. But that, I really liked that conversation in relationship to the cypress knees, and that they are these like root apparatuses for getting more breath to a tree. And almost like this idea that in the show, like everything's just trying to get more breath, like nobody has enough. And it's reaching in different ways and painful ways, and also kind of stretching and the stretching limits. And the balloon piece was definitely like, did super play on limits and played on off of like, I think performance histories of like endurance pieces, whether I was like meaning to or not, you know, because it just starts to fall into that history, I think. I hope that answered it a little, or approached.
Yeah, no, that was super cool. And then you just like added to it, and I'm like, oh, it just like becomes a bigger universe. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, y'all, this is so great, and it's so great to be in conversation with you all. I want to respect all the interpreters' time because we just got interpretation for an hour. So what I'd like to do is I want to first just say thank you to everybody and everybody who like is here and contributed. And really, I don't think I gave as good of huge bios to all the people who contributed, but it's just incredible. And I want to say a few gratitudes. And then I want to hand it off to somebody who I'm very grateful to. I want to hand it off to Bearcat, who is going to DJ a set. She really generously offered to DJ for an hour. I think we'll just do it based on how long people want to stay in the room, because also it's, you know, it's totally based on folks' capacity. I'm going to probably lie down and dance to it. But before that, I'm just going to read off the acknowledgements that I wrote in my thesis. So I want to thank my queer Crip community who has held my terror, tears, and hands when they were able as I moved inside of this institution. I want to thank my chosen kin, Tess Bath, Clay AD, and Sabina Ibarola for continued care and encouragement during this time. I want to thank my cohort of brilliant peers and every other student I got to interact with. I want to thank my faculty for the incredible support extended, with a special thanks to Emily, Sarah, who gave extra spoons to advocate for and more often witness email and after email of access denial. I want to thank my Gibbon family for the love and dark humor we have cultivated around each and every hospital visit. I want to thank my therapist for helping me hold all my parts. I want to thank my partner, Georgia McCandlish, for constantly playing and experimenting with me in the slime of all these ideas. Thank you to everyone who has touched this project. Thank you to you all. You have all become a collaborator, whether in thought or in rubber.